Hey guys, tonight we're diving into a question that's probably crossed your mind during a late-night scroll or a quiet moment in church. If Jesus was human, did he wrestle with lust? You're lying in bed, the glow of your phone casting shadows on the ceiling, and that thought hits like a rogue wave. It's bold, maybe even a little scandalous, but you can't shake it. The air feels heavier now, like the universe is holding its breath, waiting for an answer. Fair warning, this journey might rattle your soul a bit, and you probably won't survive this without questioning a few Sunday school lessons. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and local time in the comments. I'm curious where you're at while we unravel this. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing at the edge of a mental cliff, toes curling over the question that's both simple and seismic. Could Jesus, the Son of God, feel the tug of desire like you do when a stray thought sneaks in? It's not just about physical lust, though, let's be real. That's where your brain probably goes first. It's about the whole messy spectrum of human want. Hunger for power, for love, for just one more scoop of ice cream at 2 a.m. If Jesus was fully human as the Gospels claim, didn't he have to navigate that same inner chaos? And you picture him in Nazareth, dust on his sandals, the sun beating down, maybe catching a glimpse of someone and feeling something. Or did his divinity just hit the mute button on all that? Let's ground this in. A fact the Gospel accounts written between 70 and 100 CE emphasize Jesus' humanity alongside his divinity. He got tired, wept, and even snapped at a fig tree, peak human behavior if you ask me. But here's a quirky tidbit. Some early Christian sects, like the Gnostics, argued Jesus was too divine to feel human urges, claiming his body was more like a hologram than flesh. Wild right historians still argue whether the Gospel's silence on Jesus' inner desires was deliberate or just a cultural norm. Nobody was writing tell-all memoirs back then. You're left wondering, was Jesus' humanity a tightrope walk balancing divine clarity with the static of mortal impulses? You lean into the question, and it feels like peeling back layers of an onion. If Jesus could feel anger or sorrow, why not desire? You imagine him at a wedding, wine flowing, laughter bouncing off the walls. Did his heart ever skip a beat? Not in a 50 Shades way, but in that raw human way you know too well, when your pulse quickens for no reason you can name. The Bible doesn't spell it out, which is both frustrating and kind of brilliant. It leaves you room to wrestle. You're not alone in this. Centuries of thinkers have tripped over the same question. The early church fathers like Augustine were obsessed with lust, mostly because they were drowning in it themselves. Jokes on them writing 400-page treatises on sin probably didn't help. You shift in your seat, the fans hum, a steady anchor. The idea of Jesus as human isn't just theology, it's personal. You've felt desire derail your best intentions, scrolling past that one photo, chasing a fleeting high. If Jesus felt that pull even for a second, it changes everything. It means he gets you not as a distant judge, but as someone who's been in the trenches. But if he didn't, if his divinity was like spiritual Kevlar, then what does that say about your own struggles? You're not looking for a gotcha moment. You just want to know if the guy who walked on water ever had to steady his own heart. The question lingers like a low note, and you realize it's not just about Jesus, it's about you. How do you navigate a world where desire is both a spark and a snare? You're not expecting a neat answer tonight, but you're ready to dig deeper. The desert's calling, and so is the next layer of this puzzle. Let's keep walking. You're still turning over that question from before, the one that feels like a pebble in your shoe. If Jesus was human, did he wrestle with desire? Now you're digging deeper, zooming in on the tightrope. He walked fully divine, fully human, no cheat codes. You imagine him in a quiet moment, maybe sanding a table in his carpenter days, sweat on his brow, the wood grain rough under his fingers. Could his mind have wandered even for a second to something as human as wanting, not sinning, just feeling? The fan in your room hums softly, and you lean into the thought, wondering how those two natures, God and man, played tug-of-war in his heart. Let's anchor this with a fact. The Council of Chalcedon in 451 CE nailed down the doctrine that Jesus was both fully divine and fully human, two natures in one person, no mixing or splitting. It's a head-scratcher like trying to picture a square circle. But here's a quirky tidbit. Some early theologians like Apollinaris got in hot water for suggesting Jesus's divine mind overrode his human one, basically making him a god robot with a human body. The church said, nah, he's got to be both 100%. Historians still argue whether this dual nature idea was a theological slam dunk or just a way to shut everyone up at the council. You picture yourself in Jesus's sandals, the weight of divinity making every human impulse feel like a high-stakes test. Being human means your brain's a pinball machine. Sometimes thoughts bounce from hunger to boredom to, yeah, that one coworker who smells like vanilla. If Jesus was human, he had a body with nerves, hormones, the works. You wonder, did his heart ever race for no reason? Did he ever catch himself daydreaming, then snap back to focus? Not acting on desire, but just noticing it. You smirk, thinking of how your own brain betrays you during a Netflix binge. Jesus probably didn't have streaming, but he had eyes, ears, a pulse. The Gospels don't give you a director's cut of his inner monologue, which is both a tease and a gift. You're left to imagine him navigating a world full of sensory triggers, market stalls piled with figs, the chatter of crowds, the sway of a dancer at a feast. His divinity didn't make him a statue. He felt the sun's heat, the ache of long walks. You wonder if his human side ever whispered, "What if?" before his divine side said, "Chill." It's not about him messing up. It's about whether he felt the pull you know too well. Like when you're on a diet but smell fresh cookies, temptation's not a sin, but it's loud. You shift in your chair, the fan's breeze grazing your neck. The idea of Jesus wrestling with his human side hits close to home. You've had moments where desire feels like a radio. You can't turn off ads for stuff you don't need but suddenly want. If Jesus felt that static even faintly, it makes him less like a stained glass icon and more like you. Not tripping into sin, but knowing the effort it takes to stay steady. The church says he was sinless, sure, but sinless doesn't mean robot. You chuckle, imagining Jesus side-eyeing a particularly good loaf of bread and muttering, "Not today, carbs." This dual nature thing isn't just theology nerd stuff. It's raw. If Jesus was human, he had to deal with the same wiring you do emotions, instincts, the whole messy package. You think of how you've tried to be good, but still get ambushed by a random craving. If Jesus felt that even for a split second, it means he understands your struggle not from a throne but from the ground. You're not looking to catch him slipping. You just want to know if he ever had to take a deep breath and refocus. The desert's up next, where temptation gets real. Let's keep going. You're still chasing that question, the one that's like a song stuck in your head. If Jesus was human, did he feel the pull of desire? Now you're stepping into the desert, where the air's dry as old parchment, and the stakes are sky high. You picture Jesus alone, stomach growling after 40 days of nothing but sand and silence. Satan shows up slick as a used car salesman, offering a buffet of temptations. You're there with him, squinting against the sun, wondering if one of those temptations had a whiff of lust, not just for power or bread, but for something deeper, something human. The fan in your room spins lazily, its hum a faint echo of the desert's endless quiet. Let's pin this down with a fact. The Gospel of Matthew, written around 80 CE, describes Jesus' temptation in the wilderness, where Satan hits him with 3 tests: turn stones to bread, jump from the temple worship for world domination. Classic power moves, but here's a quirky tidbit. Some early Christian texts, like the apocryphal Gospel of the Nazarenes, hint that Satan's pitch was more psychological, probing Jesus' emotional weak spots. Historians still argue whether the desert story is a literal event or a symbolic showdown meant to show Jesus facing every human craving head-on. You're walking beside Jesus now, the heat pressing on your shoulders like a heavy hand. Satan's first temptation, bread from stones, seems straightforward, but you wonder, is it just about hunger or is it lust for comfort, for instant gratification? You know that feeling, scrolling through your phone, chasing a quick dopamine hit. The second test, jumping from the temple, feels like a dare to flex divine power. But maybe it's also about craving approval, the rush of being seen. And the third ruling, the world screams lust for control, the kind that makes you refresh your likes obsessively. You smirk, thinking Satan's playbook hasn't changed much in 2,000 years. But here's where it gets juicy. Could one of these temptations have brushed against something more personal, onto neon sign lust, but a subtle tug, like noticing someone's laugh in a crowd and feeling your heart stutter? The Gospels don't say, and that silence is loud. You imagine Jesus human enough to feel the desert's loneliness, the ache of isolation. Did Satan dangle a vision of connection, of intimacy to exploit that? Not in a soap opera way, but in the raw human need for closeness you feel when you're up at 3 a.m., texting someone you shouldn't. The Bible keeps it vague, which is both maddening and kind of perfect. It forces you to wrestle. You lean back, the fan's breeze tickling your neck. The desert's a brutal place to face temptation, no distractions, just you and your thoughts. You've had your own desert moments, times when desire sneaks in, dressed up as a harmless want. Jesus' victory here, shutting Satan down with Scripture, makes you wonder, was it easy or did it take everything he had? His human side must have felt the strain, the way your legs shake after a long run. You chuckle, picturing Jesus brushing sand off his robe, muttering, "Nice try, buddy," to a sulking Satan. But the win doesn't erase the fight. This moment in the desert isn't just a Bible story. It's a mirror. You've faced your own temptations not with a horned devil, but with a whisper in your head. Buy that thing, chase that feeling, scroll a little longer. If Jesus, fully human, stared down those urges, it means he knows the grind. Not just the big dramatic sins, but the small sneaky ones that trip you up daily. You're not looking to pin a flaw on him. You just want to know if he ever had to clench his fists and breathe through it like you do. The desert's behind you now, but the question's still alive. Let's see where it takes you next. You're still carrying that question, the one that's like a half-remembered dream. If Jesus was human, did he grapple with desire? You're moving out of the desert now, stepping into the bustling world of first-century Judea, where the air smells of olive oil and dust. You're walking through a market stalls overflowing with pomegranates and woven cloth, voices, haggling laughter rising. Jesus lived here, breathed this air, and you wonder how he navigated a culture where desire wasn't just personal. It was shaped by rules, shame, and expectation. The fan in your room hums a soft tether to the present as you sink into this ancient world. Let's ground this with a fact. In first-century Jewish culture, the Law of Moses, particularly, the 10 Commandments explicitly addressed lust, with the 10th commandment warning against coveting anything neighbor's wife house, or even their donkey. Desire was a moral minefield. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some Jewish sects like the Essenes took it to extremes, living celibate lives in desert communes, convinced any hint of lust was a one-way ticket to divine disapproval. Historians still argue whether mainstream Jews saw lust as inherently evil, or just a natural urge that needed strict guardrails. You're weaving through the crowd now, brushing past women in headscarves, men arguing over grain prices. Desire was everywhere, encoded in the way people dressed, spoke, moved. For a man like Jesus, unmarried in his 30s, the cultural lens was sharp. You imagine him at a village well, the midday sun glinting off the water, a woman's voice carrying a lilt as she draws her bucket. Did his human heart notice her not in a sinful way, but in that fleeting human way you know? When someone's presence sparks a flicker of warmth, you've felt it, that split-second pull before you redirect your thoughts, like swiping away a notification. The culture didn't make it easy. Men and women were often kept apart with strict codes governing interactions to avoid even the appearance of impropriety. You chuckle, thinking it's not so different from your office's HR policies, don't linger too long at the water cooler. But desire wasn't just about bodies. It was about status, wealth, the good life. People lusted after Roman luxuries, silk tunics, gilded cups, while rabbis preached contentment. You wonder, did Jesus, scraping by as a carpenter, ever feel the tug of wanting more? Not to sin, but to escape the grind. His parables about the poor suggest he saw through that trap, but seeing through it doesn't mean you don't feel it. You pause the fan's breeze grazing your cheek. This world feels both alien and familiar. You've grown up with your own cultural scripts, ads telling you what to crave, social media flaunting perfect lives. Jesus' era had its own version, a society obsessed with honor, purity, and keeping up appearances. If he was human, he wasn't blind to it. You picture him at a wedding feast, the kind where wine flows and eyes wander. Did he notice the undercurrents? The way people leaned closer, laughed louder, not judging, just observing. His teachings on the heart lust, starting in the mind, suggest he understood desire's sneaky roots, maybe because he'd felt its whisper. This cultural lens makes you rethink your own battles. Desire's not just a feeling. It's shaped by the world around you, the voices saying what's worth wanting. If Jesus moved through this maze fully human, he must have known the weight of those expectations, the effort to stay true. You smirk, imagining him dodging a matchmaker's pitch, unmarried at 30, was basically a red flag back then. But his focus was elsewhere, on a kingdom not built on fleeting wants. You're not here to pin a scandal on him. You just want to know if he ever had to steady his gaze like you do when the world's too loud. The Gospels are waiting, and they've got more to say or not say. Let's keep moving. You're still chewing on that question, the one that's like a splinter you can't quite pull out. If Jesus was human, did he wrestle with desire? Now you're flipping through the pages of the Gospels, those ancient texts that feel like a puzzle with half the pieces missing. You're sitting by a flickering oil lamp, the kind Jesus might have used, its light dancing on the walls. The Gospels tell you plenty miracles, parables, dusty roads, but they're frustratingly quiet about his inner life. You're hunting for clues. Did Jesus ever feel the spark of want, even if he never acted on it? The fan in your room hums a steady drone as you dive into these sacred silences. Let's anchor this with a fact: the 4 canonical Gospels. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John were written decades after Jesus' death, between 70 and 100 CE, and they focus more on his teachings than his personal struggles. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some scholars point to the Gospel of Philip, a non-canonical text, which weirdly suggests Jesus had a special closeness with Mary Magdalene, even kissing her, though it's vague and probably symbolic, not romantic. Historians still argue whether the Gospel's silence on Jesus' emotions was intentional to emphasize his divinity, or just a cultural thing. First-century biographers weren't exactly spilling tea about feelings. You're thumbing through these stories now, the parchment worn in your mind's eye. The Gospels show Jesus angry, flipping tables in the temple, sad, weeping for Lazarus, tired, napping through a storm. But desire, It's like the writers hit mute. You picture him in Capernaum, the sea breeze carrying the scent of fish and salt surrounded by crowds. Did his human heart ever stir, not in a tabloid way, but in that quiet human way you know, when someone's smile catches you off guard? You've had those moments staring too long before you blink and move on. The silence in the text feels like a locked door daring you to knock. You lean into the gaps and they're maddening. The Gospels don't say Jesus was immune to human urges. They just don't say he felt them either. You imagine him at the wedding in Cana, where the wine ran out until he stepped in. Picture the scene, music, laughter, people dancing a little too close. Did he notice the glances, the unspoken wants swirling around him? His teaching later about lust starting in the heart suggests he got how desire works its roots deep in the mind, not just the body. You smirk, thinking he'd probably side-eye your late-night TikTok scrolls, knowing exactly how one video leads to another. These silences aren't just empty, they're loud. They leave room for questions for you to project your own struggles onto the story. You've felt desire sneak up dressed as a harmless thought. Maybe a crush, maybe just wanting to be seen. If Jesus was human, he had a heart that could race, eyes that could linger. The Gospel's hush on this feels like a choice maybe to keep the focus on his mission, not his inner noise. You chuckle, imagining a modern gospel writer adding a chapter called Jesus versus Distractions. But the lack of details doesn't mean he was a robot. It means he was human enough to navigate the same chaos you do without a script. You shift the fan's breeze cool on your skin. This silence in the Gospels mirrors your own life. Nobody's narrating your every thought, but they're there, messy and real. If Jesus felt the pull of desire even for a second, it makes his sinlessness more human, not less. He didn't just float above temptation. He walked through it like you're trying to. You're not here to rewrite the Bible. You just want to know if he ever had to take a deep breath and refocus like you do when your mind wanders. The theologians are up next and they've got plenty to say. Let's see what they stir up. You're still holding that question, the one that's like a shadow trailing you. If Jesus was human, did he wrestle with desire? Now you're stepping into a room full of theologians, their voices buzzing like a hive debating the heart of the man who was also God. You're sitting at a worn wooden table, scrolls and ink pots scattered around the air, thick with ideas. The question of Jesus' sinless nature versus his human heart is a theological hot potato tossed around for centuries, and you're here to catch it. The fan in your room hums softly, grounding you as you wade into this ancient argument. Let's pin this with a fact. The doctrine of Jesus' sinlessness, affirmed by the early church, holds that he was tempted but never sinned, as stated in Hebrews 4:15, written around 60 to 70 CE. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some medieval theologians like Thomas Aquinas got weirdly specific, arguing Jesus could feel bodily urges, but his divine will was like a mental firewall, instantly shutting them down. Historians still argue whether this sinless yet human idea makes Jesus relatable or just a divine superhero in a human costume. You're listening to the debate now, the theologians' words sharp as flint. On one side, some say Jesus' divinity meant he felt temptation, like a mosquito bite, annoying but harmless. Others insist his humanity meant he knew temptation's full weight, the way your chest tightens when you want something you shouldn't. You picture Jesus in a quiet moment, maybe after a long day of teaching the stars bright above Galilee. Did his human heart ever flicker with a want, not sinful, just human, like the pull you feel when you see someone and think, what if you've had those moments quickly reined in like slamming the brakes before a yellow light? Theologians love splitting hairs here. If Jesus was fully human, he had a body with all its wiring. Hormones, instincts, the works. You wonder, could he feel the spark of desire, not acting on it, but noticing it the way you notice a song stuck in your head? The church says he was sinless, but sinless doesn't mean numb. You smirk, imagining a theologian choking on their wine if you suggested Jesus ever had to redirect a stray thought. But that's the crux. If he felt the pull and still walked straight, it makes his victory more real, not less. Like you trying to stick to a diet while passing a bakery. You lean back, the fan's breeze brushing your neck. This debate isn't just academic, it's personal. You've wrestled with desires, big, small, silly, like wanting to buy that overpriced coffee just for the vibe. If Jesus knew that struggle even for a split second, it means he gets you not as a cosmic referee, but as someone who's felt the same tug. Theologians argue whether his divine nature made temptation a cakewalk, or if his human side made it a marathon. You're not picking sides. You just want to know if he ever had to clench his jaw and refocus like you do when your mind wanders. This hot potato's been tossed since the early church councils, and it's still sizzling. You think back to that desert scene. Satan's temptations weren't just about power. They were about wanting what's easy, what's shiny. If Jesus felt those urges, his sinlessness wasn't a free pass. It was a choice every day. You chuckle, picturing him brushing off a fleeting thought with a muttered, "Not today," distractions. The idea that he could feel the human mess and still stay steady hits you hard. It's not about catching him slipping. It's about knowing he walked the same tightrope you're on. The definition of lust is up next, and it's about to get broader. Let's keep going. You're still circling that question, the one that's like a moth fluttering around a flame. If Jesus was human, did he wrestle with desire? Now you're zooming out, rethinking what lust even means. You're not just talking about stolen glances or racing pulses. You're diving into the deeper cravings that tug at the soul power status, the itch for more. You're sitting on a hillside, the grass prickly under you, the Galilean sun warm on your face, imagining Jesus teaching about the heart's hungers. The fan in your room hums its rhythm steady as you redefine this slippery word. Let's ground this with a fact in the Sermon on the Mount, recorded in Matthew 5. Around 80 CE, Jesus expands lust beyond physical desire, saying, "Even a lingering look can be adultery in the heart," tying it to broader cravings for what's not yours. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some early Christian ascetics, like the Desert Fathers, saw all desires, even for food or sleep, as potential lust, so they'd fast until they were basically hallucinating angels. Historians still argue whether Jesus' teachings on lust targeted only sexual sin or a wider human tendency to chase fleeting pleasures. You're pondering this now, the breeze carrying the scent of wild herbs. Lust isn't just about bodies. It's about wanting what's out of reach, riches, revenge, the perfect Instagram life. You picture Jesus in a crowded marketplace, merchants shouting, coins glinting. Did his human heart ever feel the pull of something shiny, not to steal, but to dream like you do when you scroll past a sleek car or a dream vacation? You've felt it, that pang of, if only, quickly shoved aside. If Jesus was human, he had eyes to see, a mind to wander. Could he have noticed the world's glitter and still chosen the dust of the road? This broader lens changes everything. You think back to that desert showdown. Satan didn't just offer bread. He offered control, fame, ease. That's lust too, dressed up as ambition or comfort. You smirk, realizing it's not so different from your own urges, binge-watching a show, chasing a promotion, craving likes. Jesus' parables, like the rich fool hoarding grain, scream that lust for more can trap you, whether it's wealth or something else. You wonder, did he preach this because he'd felt the temptation himself, not to sin, but to want the way your stomach growls at a bakery's window? You shift, the fan's breeze grazing your skin. Redefining lust makes Jesus' humanity feel closer. If he faced these deeper cravings, maybe for rest after a long day, or the respect of the Pharisees, he knew the effort to stay focused. His teachings don't shame desire. They redirect it, pointing to a kingdom that outshines earthly wants. You chuckle, imagining him eyeing a merchant's silk robe and muttering, "Nice, but I'm good." The idea that he could feel these pulls even briefly makes his choices hit harder. He didn't just glide past temptation. He walked through it like you're trying to. This wider view of lust mirrors your own life. You've craved things beyond the physical attention, success, that fleeting high of being enough. If Jesus, fully human, navigated those same waters, it means he gets the grind, not from a cloud, but from the ground. You're not here to paint him as flawed. You just want to know if he ever had to pause, breathe, and choose the harder path like you do when your heart's screaming for more. The people around him are next, his friends, his followers. Let's see how they fit into this. You're still wrestling with that question, the one that's like a knot you can't untie. If Jesus was human, did he grapple with desire? Now you're zooming in on the people around him, his friends, his followers, the ones who shared his meals and dusty roads. You're sitting by a fire in Bethany, the crackle of wood mixing with laughter, the smell of bread and wine heavy in the air. Jesus is here, surrounded by those he loved, and you wonder how these human bonds shaped his heart. Could connection, even pure, stir the kind of longing you know too well? The fan in your room hums its soft drone, anchoring you as you step into these relationships. Let's ground this with a fact. The Gospels, written between 70 and 100 CE, describe Jesus' close relationships with disciples like John, Peter, and women like Mary Magdalene and Martha, showing he valued deep human connection. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some fringe texts like the Gospel of Mary suggest Mary Magdalene was a favored confidant, sparking wild theories about their bond, though most scholars roll their eyes at romantic spins. Historians still argue whether Jesus' friendships were purely spiritual or carried the emotional weight of human intimacy minus any sin. You're at the table now, watching Jesus lean back, his eyes crinkling, as he laughs at Peter's bad fishing story. These moments feel so human, so like your own nights with friends when closeness teeters on the edge of something more. You've felt it, that warm pull towards someone, not always romantic, but real, like when a friend's hug lingers a second too long. If Jesus was human, could he have felt that spark, that flicker of wanting to be closer, not in a forbidden way, but in the messy, human way connection works? You picture him with Mary Magdalene, her voice soft as she asks about his parables. Did his heart ever stir, not to cross a line, but to notice her presence? These bonds weren't just background noise. Jesus called his disciples friends, wept for Lazarus, shared meals with outcasts. You wonder, did the weight of those relationships ever tug at him the way your own friendships do when you crave someone's time, their approval, their laughter? Not lust in the tabloid sense, but the longing for connection that's so human it hurts. You smirk, thinking of how you've texted a friend at midnight just to feel less alone. Jesus, unmarried, no family of his own, must have known that ache, even if he channeled it differently. His love was selfless, sure, but love's never weightless. You shift, the fan's breeze cool on your neck. This hits close. You've navigated friendships where lines blur, where care feels like a tightrope. If Jesus felt that human pull even for a moment, it makes him less like a distant prophet and more like you. Not chasing sin, but knowing the effort to keep love pure. You think back to that broader view of lust, craving attention, belonging, the more of human bonds. Jesus' life, surrounded by people yet often alone, suggests he understood that hunger. You chuckle, imagining him dodging Martha's matchmaking attempts. Unmarried at 30 was basically a social crime back then. These relationships make his humanity vivid. If he felt the warmth of friendship, the sting of betrayal, he knew the heart's quiet wants. His teachings on love, selfless, sacrificial hint. He saw how desire could twist connection, but also how it could redeem it. You're not here to spice up the Gospels. You just want to know if he ever had to steady his heart like you do when someone's laugh makes you forget the world for a second. The modern world's up next, and it's got its own spin on this. Let's see how it stacks up. You're still wrestling with that question, the one that's like a knot you can't untie. If Jesus was human, did he grapple with desire? Now you're zooming in on the people around him, his friends, his followers, the ones who shared his meals and dusty roads. You're sitting by a fire in Bethany, the crackle of wood mixing with laughter, the smell of bread and wine heavy in the air. Jesus is here surrounded by those he loved, and you wonder how these human bonds shaped his heart. Could connection, even pure, stir the kind of longing you know too well? The fan in your room hums its soft drone, anchoring you as you step into these relationships. Let's ground this with a fact. The Gospels written between 70 and 100 CE describe Jesus' close relationships with disciples like John, Peter, and women like Mary Magdalene and Martha, showing he valued deep human connection. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some fringe texts like the Gospel of Mary suggest Mary Magdalene was a favored confidant, sparking wild theories about their bond, though most scholars roll their eyes at romantic spins. Historians still argue whether Jesus' friendships were purely spiritual or carried the emotional weight of human intimacy minus any sin. You're at the table now watching Jesus lean back, his eyes crinkling as he laughs at Peter's bad fishing story. These moments feel so human, so like your own nights with friends, when closeness teeters on the edge of something more. You've felt it, that warm pull towards someone, not always romantic, but real, like when a friend's hug lingers a second too long. If Jesus was human, could he have felt that spark, that flicker of wanting to be closer, not in a forbidden way, but in the messy, human way connection works? You picture him with Mary Magdalene, her voice soft as she asks about his parables. Did his heart ever stir, not to cross a line, but to notice her presence? These bonds weren't just background noise. Jesus called his disciples friends, wept for Lazarus, shared meals with outcasts. You wonder, did the weight of those relationships ever tug at him the way your own friendships do when you crave someone's time, their approval, their laughter? Not lust in the tabloid sense, but the longing for connection that's so human it hurts. You smirk, thinking of how you've texted a friend at midnight just to feel less alone. Jesus, unmarried, no family of his own, must have known that ache, even if he channeled it differently. His love was selfless, sure, but love's never weightless. You shift the fan's breeze cool on your neck. This hits close. You've navigated friendships where lines blur, where care feels like a tightrope. If Jesus felt that human pull even for a moment, it makes him less like a distant prophet and more like you. Not chasing sin, but knowing the effort to keep love pure. You think back to that broader view of lust, craving attention, belonging, the more of human bonds. Jesus' life surrounded by people, yet often alone, suggests he understood that hunger. You chuckle, imagining him dodging Martha's matchmaking attempts. Unmarried at 30 was basically a social crime back then. These relationships make his humanity vivid. If he felt the warmth of friendship, the sting of betrayal, he knew the heart's quiet wants. His teachings on love, selfless, sacrificial hint. He saw how desire could twist connection, but also how it could redeem it. You're not here to spice up the Gospels. You just want to know if he ever had to steady his heart like you do when someone's laugh makes you forget the world for a second. The modern world's up next, and it's got its own spin on this. Let's see how it stacks up. You're still holding that question, the one that's been your shadow through this whole journey. If Jesus was human, did he wrestle with desire? Now you're standing at the end of the road, the Galilean hills fading into dusk, the air cool and heavy with the scent of earth. You're reflecting on Jesus' teachings, the words that cut through the noise of want like a blade. His message of grace, of choosing love over guilt, feels like an antidote to the cravings you've been unpacking, whether for body's power or just more. The fan in your room hums its soft rhythm, a gentle nudge as you tie this all together. Let's ground this with a fact. In the Gospel of John, written around 90–100 CE, Jesus teaches about love as the greatest commandment, urging followers to love God and neighbor above all, redirecting desire towards something eternal. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some early Christians, like the Montanists, took this so seriously. They banned marriage, thinking any earthly love was a distraction, talk about overkill. Historians still argue whether Jesus' teachings on desire were about suppressing it or transforming it into something higher, like a fire tamed to light a home. You're sitting now, the horizon glowing gold, imagining Jesus speaking to a crowd, his voice steady but warm. His words about the heart, about seeking the kingdom, don't shame your wants. They reframe them. You think back to that broader view of lust, the hunger for more than just the physical. Jesus' parables, like the pearl of great price, suggest desire's not the enemy. It's about what you chase. You've felt that chase, scrolling for validation, craving a moment's peace. If Jesus was human, could he have known that pull not to sin, but to want like you do, when life feels too small? His teachings say yes, but point you to grace, not guilt. This hits deep. You picture him on a dusty road, maybe after a long day, his human heart heavy with the world's weight. Did he ever feel the tug of an easier life, a fleeting wish for rest, for connection? Not falling, but noticing the way you notice a coworker's laugh, or a shiny new gadget. His grace over guilt message feels like he's been there, not judging your stumbles, but offering a hand up. You smirk, imagining him glancing at your overflowing Amazon cart and saying, maybe try less next time. His teachings don't erase desire. They show you how to aim it like an arrow at a target beyond the horizon. You lean back, the fan's breeze soft on your skin. This journey through deserts, markets, gospels, and coffee shops hasn't given you a neat answer. And maybe that's the point. If Jesus, fully human, felt the spark of want, his victory wasn't in being immune, but in choosing love every time. You've wrestled with your own wants, big and small, and his words feel like a map, not a whip. You chuckle, picturing him shrugging off a tempting thought with a quiet, nice try. But I've got work to do. That's the grace you're reaching for, the kind that sees your mess and says, keep going. As the light fades, you feel the weight of this question soften. It's not about pinning Jesus down. It's about seeing yourself in his story. His humanity means he gets you not from a throne, but from the dust, the hunger, the heartbeats. You're not alone in your cravings, and his grace is bigger than your guilt. Let the stars come out now. Let the world grow quiet. You've walked a long road, and it's okay to rest. The question's still there, but it's lighter, like a friend who walks beside you. Close your eyes. Let the fans hum, carry you. You're known, you're enough, and tomorrow's a new day. You're lying back now, the room dim, the fan's gentle hum blending with your slowing breath. The journey's done, and that question whether Jesus wrestled with desire feels less like a puzzle and more like a quiet companion. You see him now not on a pedestal, but in the dust of Galilee, his sandals warn his eyes kind. If he felt the pull of want like you do, it only makes his grace deeper, a light that doesn't blind but warms. The world's noise, its ads, its cravings fades like a distant echo. You're not your desires, not your stumbles. His love, the kind that asks nothing but gives everything, wraps around you like a soft blanket. Let the stars outside keep watch. Let your heart settle. You've wandered far, and it's time to drift. Sleep now, held in grace, until the morning whispers your name.